You are listening to Book Clips, a mini podcast where authors and narrators introduce you to lesbian fiction. You can find a buy link and more information about this book in the show notes. Enjoy!
Hi, my name's Rebecca Langham, and I'll be doing a reading from Beneath the Surface. Leading the way to the ozone, Jez's thick blonde curls swayed as she walked. She was taller than Lydia had realized on the night of her arrival. Even with musk and ankle boots on, Lydia was still shorter. Being underground in the cool air helped prevent Lydia from melting into a nervous puddle of buttons and synthetic denim threads. Curiosity had kept her awake all night, and just as she was about to leave the H-zone, her eyelids wanted nothing more than to close. When they reached the far end of the umbilical passageway, Jez nodded toward the glossy plate beside the door. Lydia pressed her thumb against it, but rather than the gentle tingle she expected, her thumb burned hot. Bloody hell! Jez shook her head. Sorry, those morons didn't extend your security clearance to this end. If we tell one of the protectors inside, they should be able to fix it all up. She reached out and triggered the door. Here we go. The Quadrant 4 Outsider Colony. Jez spoke as though reading from a well-rehearsed script, her eyes fixed ahead as they entered. After the near silence of the passageway, the chatter and movement inside the brilliantly lit outsider district assaulted Lydia's ears. She couldn't see any of the outsiders, but their voices and footsteps echoed from inside their rooms. She'd been curious about the aliens since childhood, but Lydia hadn't understood the depth of her curiosity until that moment. It swelled in her chest. Are the levels set out much the same as on the human side? Lydia asked Jez. Sort of. There are 4 levels in the ozone, but they're subdivided. You won't need to worry about half of them. The lower level is much larger here than on the human side, for the workstations. What kind of workstations? Lydia said. Production floors, Jez said as she nodded at one of the guards. Anything from nano IDs to solar power cells. The O's can make anything, about 3 times faster than human workers, and using less equipment. So having them involved increases the global production rate, lets us save renewable energy for climate control systems, helps the big men upstairs skirt around the hefty carbon emission taxes. This might all run under government orders, but it sure doesn't hurt Pearsall's bottom line. I bet they were pretty damn pleased to get the colony operation contracts back in the day. Hurry it up. Lydia couldn't see who the protector ahead of them was yelling at. He stood in a doorway and looked inward. Come on, clean it up. You're late for work detail. The protector's black, straight-legged trousers, button-up shirt and clunky boots made for an unimaginative display of authority. The bright yellow pulse weapon attached to his belt sent an immutable message. From what she'd seen through VR, even a low-voltage blast from a pulsar would be enough to incapacitate a person. Lydia hadn't considered the means used to keep the alien population under control. In fact, she hadn't thought about them needing to be monitored at all. Weren't these colonies supposed to be self-determining communities? A safe haven for a problematic foreign population? The presence of the guards, protectors, usually near a socialization table, suggested otherwise. As they approached another soci table, Lydia caught her first glimpse of a female outsider. By human standards, the woman might have been in her early 30s. Outsiders were, overall, like humans, but she wasn't sure if they aged the same way. Come to think of it, Lydia couldn't recall hearing much at all about an outsider's lifespan. Surely it was something that had been observed and studied. Why weren't the general population aware of such details? Why hadn't she herself ever thought to ask the question before now? She dismissed the thought for the moment, preferring to focus on the outsider woman. Her eyes focused on a frayed novel. She seemed to be taking advantage of the fleeting peace offered at that time of morning. At least, that's what Lydia would have been doing. The woman's deep fascination with whatever she was reading could be seen in the hunch of her shoulders and the deep lean of her chin into her free hand. With the shoulders of a swimmer, the woman seemed athletic despite her small frame. Long, straight hair fell across the outsider's shoulders and spilled down her back like a yellow velvety cape. Her toned and muscular shape, light hair, and quiet concentration all made Lydia want to stop, to speak to her, to ask her name. Lydia took a quick hop to catch up to Jez. The woman back there, she was reading a book. The books are supplied by humans? Jez stopped walking and glanced over Lydia's shoulder. Ah, yes. Alessia's often there before work duty, reading whatever she can get her hands on. Her voice reflected a degree of passive disapproval. The outsider must have heard her name, because she looked up. I'd be careful of that one, Jez said. She's got this way of getting in your head. One time I found her sitting outside of my classroom, cross-legged on the floor. She must have been listening to a lesson or something. Jez's gaze was still fixed on Alessia. I told her to bugger off. She did eventually, but she just looked at me for a while first. You know, that freaky alien expression. Lydia didn't reply. She struggled to seem disinterested in Alessia, but even across the distance between them, the outsider's eyes found her own. Lydia couldn't see anything freaky about her. All she saw was a curiosity to match her own. She hoped she wasn't imagining it. Jez kicked the toe of her shoe against the floor. I guess you'll see it soon enough, she told Lydia as they continued. But yes, reading is fine. If they weren't allowed to do anything, I imagine they would all go mad. Lydia nodded, though she didn't fully understand. Regardless of small freedoms, the place felt like a prison. Most of the books are just old crap. They're left over from before the Hive archive system went live, Jez told her. She held her hand outward to indicate their arrival at the school. They hadn't walked far at all, but Lydia's head felt explosive. There was so much to process already. She hadn't even taught a class yet. The classrooms are pretty close to a lot of the living quarters. Most of the families are on this floor, a few single inhabitants. Mess halls downstairs. They eat at set times based on the job they do, Jez said. The first thing Lydia noticed about the tiny school was the aroma. She'd never experienced a combination of scents quite like it before. She smelled aged paper, wood, and a sweet floral odour. The school's 2 classrooms captured characteristics of the past that made Lydia feel at home. Watching sensory films set in years gone by, she'd often mused she might have been born in the wrong era, that a nostalgic mysticism of the quaint school transported her to another realm. Good morning, Mistress Jez. An androgynous voice rang out from the back corner of one of the classrooms. Lydia hadn't noticed the outsider at first. He'd been kneeling on the floor. She didn't know where to turn her attention first. Like Jez, his irises were molten gold. His hair was a tawny orange-brown and fell messily over the tops of his ears. The man's face was the colour of the moon, and was smooth and hairless. Lydia was tempted to reach out and run her fingertips along his cheek, just to find out what it felt like. It just wasn't the same as seeing them, the aliens, in videos or images. Jez squared her shoulders, and one hand moved to her waist. Peleus, this is Lydia Barrett. She'll be working in the other room as of this morning. You fixed the broken desk? Lydia was taken aback by her tone. Jez wasn't quite rude, but she'd ignored Peleus's greeting and avoided looking him in the eyes. Peleus turned his attention to Lydia and nodded, a smile revealing brilliant white teeth. Mistress Lydia, welcome. Please let me know if you find anything in this area that's out of order. It's my job to fix things, he said. The sweetness that filled the air had grown stronger when he moved closer. It was him, Lydia realized. She tried to smile back, though she could feel Jez's disapproval passing over her like a cold fog. Thank you, Peleus. Her colleague had started to sway ever so slightly from side to side as her eyes glazed over, clear sign of impatience. Peleus dropped his chin and slipped past them, through the entrance and out of sight. Jez took a deep breath and seemed to return to herself. You'll work in the left room. Did you take the course in 20th century teaching methods at Pearsall College? I did. I really enjoyed. Okay, good. I know it's a history elective, but you'll need it. There's absolutely no Hive access, minimal use of projectors or screens, no implants. As far as the outsider kids are concerned, we all use offline tablets, some paperbacks, 2D video, and... Well, I suppose you were told all of this before you got here. No, it's good to hear it again. I appreciate it, Lydia replied. Feeling brave, she spoke again. Peleus seems friendly. He's so much more... Her hands drew circles in the air, looking for a way to finish the sentence. Jez interjected. Human than you expected? Lydia brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Sorry, I didn't mean... Yes, I'm not sure what I expected, though. It's not as if I didn't know they're shaped the same as us, but his whole demeanour. As long as you remember that we've got a job to do, and that is to keep the children calm, sensible, and busy while their parents are working on the bottom floor, then it won't really matter what expectations you had. Looks like we've got about 30 minutes before everything kicks off for the morning. Do you know what you're covering? Lydia nodded. You'll do great, Jez said. It is good to have you here, Lydia. I know I might be a little bit intense sometimes, but I just say what I mean. The woman smiled, touching her hand to Lydia's shoulder. You're about to teach outsiders. Don't start to feel like one yourself. With one last nod, Jez entered her classroom. Lydia remained in the doorway of the other room. Shit, she thought. In a few minutes, the place would be full of children from another planet. What had she gotten herself into? You've been listening to an extract from Beneath the Surface by Rebecca Langham. being released by 9 Star Press in January 2018.
This was an episode of Book Clips, a mini podcast where authors and narrators introduce you to new books with a short reading. Get the book now by clicking on the buy link in the show notes. This link works for Amazon US, UK and Canada. If you use our links, we earn a small commission from Amazon. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to this podcast.